What is the difference between values and virtues?
Virtues are social constructs that we all agree everyone should have more of. And they're like kindness, courage, resilience, integrity. Let's all just agree everyone needs more of those. Values are choices. Scope is a value. Belovedness is a value. Here's another value for you. It's work centrism. I'll work to live, but I'm not making work the center of my life. It's very complicated in relationships. If one person has work centrism as number one and the other person has it at number 12, that's just one long fight.
Yeah, 100%.
Aptitudes are the dominant hand of your brain. It's so much more natural. So you're so much better off building your life and your career where you already have the aptitudes. Now, if you want to be more of a leader, you can fix those aptitudes. There's aptitude for brainstorming, like how you think about ideas. And this is not just how creative you are, it's how much ego control you have. All this noise to actually live your authentic, aligned life is the hardest thing you'll ever do. That is the fight of your life.
For people who are feeling stuck and burnt out, is there a first step that they should take today to begin realigning their lives?
I would say start with you.
Suzy Welch, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm so good and so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm delighted. We live in tumultuous times, and I think the topic of your book couldn't be more timely, Becoming You. It's about finding and becoming the person that you're meant to be, which I think is crucially important. And so I want to get into the methodology. I've got a very savvy audience, super intelligent, an audience of geniuses from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds. And I think this is probably a question that many people are asking themselves today. How do I become the best version of myself? Especially we're sort of in this weird dystopian time in many ways, but like AI is, causing chaos and tumult in our industries. But I guess let's take a step back before we get into the methodology. Why don't you talk about your background and what you hope to achieve in the writing of Becoming You?
All right. Well, Becoming You grew out of and still grows out of a class that I teach at NYU Stern School of Business. And what happened was I was coming out of the pandemic. And like many people, I did not know what to do with the rest of my life. And my questions about what I was going to do with the rest of my life were compounded by the fact that I had lost my husband in March 2020. And I also was pretty sure I didn't want to go back to my job in broadcast journalism because I had changed. And I was lucky in that I had had a very successful career and I could do a bunch of different things, but I was really lost. And over the years, I had been developing a methodology to help people answer the question, what should I do with my life? I had a show on CNBC called Suzy Welch, Fix My Life, and Get to Work with Suzy Welch. And I had been doing this both on NBC and CNBC and working with private clients. And then I didn't want to go back to doing that, and I was struggling. And one of my kids, out of the mouths of babes, although he's not a baby, he was 34 at the time or 33 at the time, he said to me, why don't you teach your class on that methodology? And I thought, oh, that is so exciting. I could do that because the world was really effed up and people were really confused and struggling, and there was so much angst and despair. And so I went to the dean of NYU Stern, who I knew from my previous life, and I said, I have an idea for a class that I wish I had taken when I went to business school, when I went to HBS in 1986. And I said, I wish I had taken a class like this. It would have saved me a great deal of, boneheaded wrong turns and valleys. And I have an idea for this class. I want to call it Becoming You, Crafting the Authentic Life You Want and Need. And he said, well, we don't have a class like that. And I said, yeah, I know. I looked at the course catalog. You don't have it. And he said, well, have you ever taught a class before? And I said, no. And he said, have you ever written a class before? And I said, no, I haven't. Okay, but I have a burning desire to do this. He said, let's try it as an experiment. And I went away and I created a curriculum based on what I kind of thought a class could be. And then we put it in the course catalog. And we had thought we were going to do a little experiment with 20 students. And the dean called me a few days later because you put a class called Becoming You in a course catalog in 2022 or it was 2021. And, it's kind of, if you build it, they will come. And he said, how do you feel about teaching, more students? Would you feel okay teaching 40 students? I said, I'll try. And he said, 2 days later, how about 80 students? And I said, okay, I'll do my best. And then I started teaching the class, and within 3 weeks, the wait list was 800 students.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So runaway success.
Well, it was, look, I don't want to say it was because of me. I was giving it all I had, and I was very vulnerable in that classroom saying, please co-create this class with me. I've not ever done this before. But the methodology was good, and it was very science-backed. It was very research-backed. I am the least woo-woo guest you've ever had. I am like, I can't stand the BS around purpose when people are told to live their purpose. And, oh, really? Where do you find that? How do you even know what it is? And so I wanted to remove that garbage that actually makes people so distraught and despairing because they think everybody has their purpose but them. And so I started teaching it, and the class was well received. And one thing led to another, and finally NYU actually was very agreeable when I said, I think we need to bring this outside of NYU. We need to do an open enrollment version of it on NYU's campus. They said, let's do it. And so now I'm able to teach it to people from around the world. And from that point, I was approached. I wrote a book, and which sort of explains the methodology, and that's what we're doing now. We're just expanding people who are learning about it. Now, finally, we're certifying coaches in it, which is great, so that other people can teach it besides me. And it's exciting because now we have thousands of success stories, and we know the methodology works. So that's very exciting and gratifying.
Super, and so valuable. I mean, I was going to say that it should be taught at every university because university credits are expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I think it should be taught in a way. You just, what the saddest thing I hear is when a kid takes it when they're a senior or their second year in business school, and they say, I wish I'd taken this when I was a freshman because I took all the wrong classes now that I know what I really should be doing, what I really am meant to do. And so, there's an argument for sort of going into senior year in high school. But frankly, I've now taught the methodology to people from age 16 to 78. And there's when is a bad time to figure out what you should do with your life? Like, there's no too late. There's people who are in their 50s and 60s, and they're like, okay, I gave my whole life to somebody else. I gave my life to the man. I gave it to my partner. And now I want to have my own life, and I don't even know where to begin. And for them, the methodology meets them just exactly where they are, because it is designed to meet people where they are. And but you have to do the work. It's not a hack. It's no silver bullet. You have to do the work.
Yeah, in your book, you coined the term area of transcendence, and I want to unpack that because it took me until my early 30s to figure out what I think mine is, and I'm living that. But before we get to that, I've heard you say that you hate the phrases "live your purpose," "live your passion." Why is that?
Why are you triggering me here? I hate them because I think they make people sadder and more pessimistic than they are intended. I mean, I think people say it with the best intentions, and of course, I think you should live your purpose, but then you're left to think, well, what is my purpose? And that just doesn't fall out of the sky in your head. It takes work to figure it out. And usually somewhere in our life, and you're really lucky and really young to know your purpose, okay? Congratulations. Usually it's a very iterative process, and we kind of arrive at it usually at a point that we think is too late. And we spend our whole lives wondering, is this the right thing? I'm just going to do it for a little while longer. Now, passion is another thing entirely, because my whole problem with passion is that, go live your passion. What if you're bad at it? Okay, there's a name for a passion that you're bad at. It's a hobby. And so when you are actually being told to go live your passion, you're sending somebody into a very uncertain territory because, I'd like to be a singer. I have a very bad voice, all right? And so it doesn't make any difference that I'm passionate about it. It's not viable. So I immediately, and look, you're really, really lucky if you're good at your passion, but not everybody is.
Yeah, not everybody is. How do you know, at what point do you know, because there are people for whom their passion is their, what do you call it, your aptitude or your economically viable interest? At what point does one pivot versus double down?
Okay, let's talk about those terms for a second just to get clear on the methodology. And I'll be very quick here. The methodology involves excavating 3 data sets. The first is your values, which virtually nobody knows their values. I'm happy to talk about that forever and ever, ever. This podcast could not be long enough for me to talk about that. But so the first data set is your values, ranked 1 to 16. There are 16 human values. Everybody's got some level of each one of them. And that's the number one thing you've got to figure out are your values, how you want to live, play, relate, show up, all these things, not virtues. Virtues are totally separate. Values, that's the first data set. The second data set is aptitudes. That's what you're good at. There are 9 cognitive aptitudes. 9. Are you a brainstormer or an idea processor? Are you a specialist or generalist? These can be tested for at age 15. That's when they're set. But there's another set of aptitudes, and that's your personality. Because you can be great at a job because of your personality, and you can suck at a job because of your personality. And so we test in the Becoming You methodology your cognitive, your intellectual aptitudes, and your personality aptitudes. And then the third data set is your economically viable interests. This is the work that calls you emotionally or intellectually, that pays you at a level of affluence that's in your values data. And you take that, those are 3 big data sets, which the methodology excavates in a very deliberate way, very intentional way, no guessing involved. We test for it, we measure it, we do all sorts of things to find it out. And then you synthesize at the center something we call your area of transcendence. You can call it purpose. I like the term transcendence because when Maslow created the hierarchy of needs, the top part of the pyramid was this thing he called self-actualization. That's Oprah territory. That's living your best life. But 15 years later, he was a great scholar. He was at Brandeis. 15 years later, he went back and he said, I got to revise this. It's very rarely talked about. He revised it because he said, actually, at the tippy top, it's self-actualization plus he called a cosmic connection, but it means being a part of something bigger than yourself. It's some kind of connection. It's like leaving a legacy. There's some kind of spiritual element to it, something that just is a deeper thing than just self-actualizing. And virtually everyone I've ever met wants that. And he called that transcendence. So I call it area of transcendence.
I would call it alignment.
Yeah, it is alignment, for sure. When you align your values, and this is what we're looking for, is the alignment or the intersection, the sort of overlap, if you imagine a Venn diagram of those 3 data sets, that's where you're going to feel exquisitely alive. That's when you're going to be doing work that matches your values, is aligned with your aptitudes, and also fulfills your intellectual or emotional interests. That's the work, and that's what we do in Becoming You. And it's sometimes people go through the process of now. Tens of thousands of people, if not more, have gone through the process now. And sometimes people get to the end of it and they do a little tweaking and they say, okay, it's almost right what I'm doing. I just have to change industry, or I have to just move from, I think I can stay what I'm doing, but I just need to do more logistics and less HR, something like that. But other times it's the sheer kind of, Daenerys in the last episode of Game of Thrones, you burn down the world. And I mean, I've seen these very big hairpin turns and everything in between. But you have to do the work, and it's no guessing. So you ask, this is a very long answer to your question, when do you double down and when do you pivot? And the answer is, you got to figure out what it is you should be doing and then lay your chips on that.
Yeah.
That's hard. I mean, that decision, there's so many reasons we don't do that. I mean, it's not just inertia, it's expectations, it's expedience, it's events, it's this voice in our head saying, but you were supposed to be a doctor, or, all this noise to actually live your authentic, aligned life is the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's a fight. That is the fight of your life.
Yeah. Well, what is the difference between values and virtues? And can you give us some examples of values?
Love to do that. So virtues are social constructs that we all agree everyone should have more of. And this is pretty consistent over generations and cultures. And they're like kindness, courage, resilience, integrity. Like, let's all just agree everyone needs more of those. I mean, there's really no debate. Virtues are virtues. Everybody should have more of them. No one is going to sit there and say people should have less kindness, okay? Values are choices. Okay, values are choices. Let's just talk about, so there's 16 of them. There are different inventories of values. I invented one of them. It's called the Welch-Bristol Values Inventory. You can read about it in my PhD thesis if you'd like, but it's what the whole methodology is based on in the values section or mine. And I am building on the shoulders of giants. The other great inventory is the Schwartz Values Inventory. It has 19 values, mine has 16. So here's an example of a value. Scope is a value. That's the value that reflects how big and exciting a life you want, and along that continuum is how contained and predictable a life you want. That's a choice. Some people want to be like Bianca Jagger on the back of a white stallion, walking into Studio 54 at 4 a.m., okay, while the crowd goes crazy. They'll take the chaos. They'll take all the stuff that comes with a big, exciting, crazy life. That's the choice. And other people want to know where they're going to be a year from now at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And they don't want, and everything in between. It's a continuum scope, okay? Here's another value. It's called belovedness. It's how important a partnered, intimate relationship is to you. Okay, a lot of people break up over this. One person says, belovedness is my top value. I have a ton of it. It's number one. And I want my life, the number one organizing principle of my life is my partnered, intimate relationship, either the one I have or the one I want. Okay? And all the way down on the other end of the continuum where people will say, I want a relationship, or love is fine, but I'm not organizing my life around it. And when couples break up or relationships end, the first thing I check for is where each one of the couple is on belovedness. That's another value. Here's the value, another value for you. And people fight about it all the time. It's work centrism. And this is the desire for work to be the organizing principle of your life. There are huge generational differences around this. I've done tons of research on this. I'd love to talk to you about it because I love my research. But I would say, so work centrism is like, I just saw a fantastic video with Cardi B saying, I work all the time. I love work. I'm not going to apologize for work. My mom worked. My grandmother worked. And I just love work. And nobody's going to tell me to relax. She has very high work centrism. And there's other people for whom work centrism is, okay, I'll work to live, but I'm not making work the center of my life, and everything in between. And I would say that one of the issues generationally that's going on right now is that we have very good data, because I have a test called the Values Bridge that ranks your values from 1 to 16. Since May, 66,000 people have taken it. So we have the data on generational values, and Gen Z has work centrism at number 9 out of 16. Well, you can imagine where other generations have it, and you can imagine what bosses want, but it's not a generational value for Gen Z. The generational value for Gen Z is something called eudaimonia. Now, we use that word because I don't like to make people's head better. It means it's the Greek word for flourishing, and it encompasses self-care, pleasure, recreation, sex, anything that feels good. That's eudaimonia. For 75% of Gen Z, that's the number 1 ranked value.
Wow.
And I got to tell you that when companies are hiring, they're not exactly looking for people high on eudaimonia, and this is where a lot of conflict comes in, is that if you're presenting with eudaimonia and you're looking for a company that values eudaimonia, it's pretty hard. And so values can, if your eudaimonia is your number 1 value, and you're in a partnered relationship with somebody for whom work centrism is the number 1 value, or achievement is a number 1 value, there's a lot of noise. But imagine, the tool is called the Values Bridge for a reason, because the idea is we could start talking about the value and the level we have of it instead of pointing fingers and saying, you're a workaholic. No, actually, I have high work centrism. You're lazy. No, actually, I have lower work centrism. And this is just a way of talking about values instead of pointing fingers and raising the temperature, which is already high enough.
Have you found in your research that values can change over time?
So we have very good research on this. It's in 2 years, I'll have the absolute answer for it. Right now, it looks like that values are pretty set by age 25. And what changes is how much you're expressing them or repressing them. Because you can have a value and not live it at all. So for instance, you can have very high scope. You can want to be Bianca Jagger going to Studio 54, and then you can have 4 children, as I did, and your scope is going to have to be suppressed or repressed. Otherwise, you're going to be you're going to actually be hurting people, okay? And you don't want to hurt people with your values. And so the tool measures how much you have of each value, but also tells you how much you're living it. So values, there's 2 schools of thought. There's 2 schools of study in values. One is values formation, what causes our values. This is the land of psychiatrists, psychologists, sociologists, cultural anthropologists. And a lot of things go into the stew that create our values, like parents, friends, your culture, society, news events, trauma. And it goes into a bit, and it's stirred up, and you pretty much have your values mid-20s. You could have them a little bit earlier. But what changes your values is a seismic life event. So I think that I had belovedness probably is number 2 value. I always had the same number 1 value, but I had probably belovedness as number 2, my life centered on my marriage. And then I lost my husband. And belovedness, I just took the test again. Now for me, belovedness is number 16, bottom value. And I don't know, maybe that will change someday, but he's been gone 6 years and I still have it at my bottom value. And so I do think a seismic life event, a child, a divorce, a deep trauma. You could have, say, for instance, very high scope, be traveling, have a traumatic experience, as people sometimes do, traveling, something dangerous happens, and you can lose your value for scope. So a traumatic life event can definitely upend your values. But in general, I think values are pretty constant.
Yeah, my scope, I would say, what is that, like how many points do each of these values, like what is the scale?
The scale, well, it's all done behaviorally. There's a scale from 1 to 7 underneath it. But when you do it, yeah, you're moving a bead on a bar that sort of shows high to low, but you're doing it by, we don't ask people to self-report. Okay, because we found that it wasn't as accurate as us asking behavioral questions. So the tool, of course, went through a lot of versions in beta, and it's been tweaked by psychometricians and data scientists repeatedly. Ultimately, behavioral questions are what you have to do to get the real reporting. Because I found when we just did it with self-reporting, magically, people always had family number one because they were embarrassed or felt uncomfortable having family down lower, okay? Or they felt like, okay, I should say achievement. And then when we ask behavioral questions, achievement, which is the value of having success other people can see, was down at like number 15. So we had to, you are not self-reporting typically. I don't think self-reporting is a good way to get at what your values really are. We lie to ourselves because of identity issues.
Yeah, you should get involved with nutrition science. It happens all the time. And one of the cornerstones of nutrition science is the food frequency questionnaire. It's like people are notoriously... they underreport how many calories they consume.
For sure.
It's crazy.
No, I mean, like I literally, I do it. I lie about how many gummy bears I eat a day, which is a lot.
It's human. Scope, I would say that I'm pretty high in scope. I like my work to have I like to feel like I'm working towards something bigger than myself.
But that's radius. Radius is the value of wanting to change the world, systemic change. I would guess that radius would be in your very top values.
Yeah.
Because the work you do is to change behaviors of large groups of people. And that's different than the value of non-civi, which is not for oneself, which is helping, which is service, but that's like if you're driving down the street and somebody is like got a flat tire, you stop and you want to help change their tire, or you want to be an HR, or you want to be a nurse. That's non-civi. Radius of people who want systemic change. I'm going to guess you're very high there.
Yeah, for sure. And then work centrism is pretty high for me. Like I know people differ in terms of this value, like probably significantly, but for me, I don't mind working 24 hours a day if I'm engaged. Yeah.
But some people, like I was at a conference the other day and I was amazed. The person who was on a panel with me was saying, I work only 4 hours a week, and, she was sort of celebrating this. And I was thinking, this is a value. It's not like that's universally what everybody wants. And the people who have high work centrism are sort of like, we're culturally kind of out now. And I love the fact that your value, the language of values allows you to say, look, this is high work centrism, my choice. I'm happy to live with the consequences.
Yeah. My relationships, like my interpersonal relationships, have at times suffered because I'm wed to my work.
Yeah. And that's why it's good to know values. The tool has a functionality where if you take it with somebody else who's taken it, you check a box, your values come up next to each other with a comparison on the harmonies and the conflicts. And my daughter's about to get married, and she and her fiance both just took the values bridge, and they checked the box, and they were like, hey, Mom, come into the room. We just got our results. Come and read our tarot cards and tell us what it means. And as I was walking towards them, I was like, dear God, please let their values be aligned. And then as I approached them, my daughter said to me, is it normal for two people to have the exact same values? And I was like, thank you, Jesus. I was so happy that their top 6 values were exactly the same. But it's very complicated in relationships. If one person has work centrism as number 1 and the other person has it at number 12, that's just one long fight.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So the goal is then to be able to identify your values and then independently of that, your aptitudes?
Yes, we have 4 tests for aptitudes. With values, we do a lot of different exercises because they're fun and they're kind of like stretching. But ultimately, it all goes into the values bridge. And then we get the rank order of your values from behavioral questions. Then separately, you do the assessment of your aptitudes. And we have different tests for that, and people come out and they're like, oh, yeah, now that I'm hearing that I'm a 3D visualizer, that reminds me of how much I used to play with Legos. And meanwhile, they're in a job that has nothing to do with 3D visualization. They wonder why work feels like a suit that doesn't fit. So we do that. But then for personality, we have to get over the fact that the truth is our personality is not the list of beautiful adjectives that we would use to describe ourselves. Like, okay, what's your personality? I'm kind, I'm a good listener, I'm very loyal, I'm generous, and yeah, maybe you are, but your personality is actually the way the world experiences you. That's a hard lesson for some people to hear. Nobody likes hearing it the first time. And so part of the Becoming You process is to go through 360 feedback where up to 40 people anonymously evaluate you on 3 different areas. It takes 5 minutes. We have a test that takes 5 minutes. It's called Pi 360. How are the quality of your relationships with people? How's the quality of your ideas? Your own ideas are how you help other people give birth to their ideas. And how good are you at finishing stuff, getting stuff done? Do you finish what you started? And we quick test, and everybody has to hear. And then what they get from that is not only what people are saying about them, but they also evaluate themselves, and they get something that all of us benefit from, a self-awareness score. Because it can be, people go in saying, oh, I'm very self-aware, and then their self-awareness score is like 20%. So that's how we test for aptitudes with both. An aptitudes test, U-Science, is what we use. I think it's a very good test. It's a little pricey, but it's a very, very good test. And you can just get it online. Then we test for where people are along the continuum from individual contributor to leader. Because society tells you should be a leader. You know, from when you're a little kid, you're being told to be the captain of the team.
Yeah.
But some people are just not built to be leaders. And not only that, they don't want to be leaders. I mean, my oldest son, I have 4 kids, I think I mentioned. My oldest son, natural leader, wanted to be captain of every team. And he did very well, gone to great school. Then we come along to my second son, and it's getting time for him to go to college, and he's a great swimmer. And I say to him, okay, time for you to become the captain of the swimming team. You got to do this. You got to suck up to the coach. And I start coaching him on all the stuff he's got to do to become captain of the team. And I could see him resisting. And I remember one day he came home and I said, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you help that kid who was not swimming as well? And he said, Mom, I don't want to be captain of the team. And this was years and years ago. He's 30-something now, 34 now. And I remember thinking, that's right. Like, I don't want to shove my values down his throat. He didn't want to be a leader. It's not his personality. It's not his aptitude. And so we test also in the methodology for where you are on that continuum. Now, if you want to be more of a leader, you can fix those aptitudes. It's not like other aptitudes. But we test that with a free test. It's called Career Traits Compass. Get it online. And then we test for personality with 360 feedback. That's the only way to really test your personality. People want to say, well, I'm just such a good communicator. And I was giving a speech last night, and a woman raised her hand, and she said a tarot card reader told her that she should go into communications. And it took a lot of self-control for me to say, guess what, there's a test for this. So that's the second set of data that we gather.
Is there often a mismatch? I mean, do people tend to, does there tend to be a delta between how people, self-identify and how they're perceived from the outside?
Yes. And this is why so many people are miserable. I mean, because why do we end up in the jobs or careers we end up in? You should be a lawyer. Okay, I mean, there's just, like, when kids come out of, in high school, there's fantastic research on this. In high school, kids, the average kid knows about 5 jobs, 2 of which are their parents' jobs. 5, okay? Then they go to college. You'd think that'd expand radically in college. The same research team looked at college, 7 jobs. I mean, there's 135 industries. There are 100 and something different types of jobs within those industries. There's 12 identified mega trends. I mean, to force open the aperture and get people off of conveyor belts is very, very hard. And typically the worst driver of the conveyor belt is your loving parent who wants you to be employed because they don't want to be paying for you for the rest of their lives. And so they try to get you onto a conveyor belt very early on. And then we end up and we're like, yeah, I'm on it, but it doesn't fit my values or my aptitudes or my interests. And then we think, oh, sunk cost. I've been doing it for 12 years.
Sunk cost.
I'm just going to stay. And then they're miserable. So yes, there's a delta.
Wow. Yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit of self-awareness, but the more I speak to experts such as yourself in the field of psychology and entrepreneurship and, and other sciences, I learned that self-awareness is actually often lacking, especially today.
Yeah, among social scientists, the sort of what we say to each other all the time is like, people, by definition, people don't know how self-aware they are. I mean, everyone thinks they're self-aware. Okay, it's just like everyone thinks they're a good listener. Have you ever heard anyone say, I'm a terrible listener? I mean, it just doesn't happen. And self-awareness, everyone thinks they're self-aware. So to test, we have to do this 360 feedback where you rate yourself on exactly the same behaviors that 40 anonymous people, or you can do it, we give you results up as soon as you have 12 people, because then it's aggregated and it's anonymous. You can get your results, but you can do it with up to 40 people. And it's very rare that somebody's not shocked by their results.
And so aptitudes, these are essentially skills that can be no,
they're not skills. Okay,
they're not.
Aptitudes are your inborn, innate proclivities and that make you better or worse at certain skills. So if you're a 3D so there's one of the aptitudes is whether or not you're a 3D visualizer, meaning you can manipulate objects in space. Like architects are 3D visualizers. Product people tend to be 3D visualizers. I'm not at all. I mean, I am terrible at it, even though my dad was an architect. And so this is inborn, whether or not you are. Now, can you learn to be a 3D visualizer? Yes, but you'd be better off, if you're not a 3D visualizer, not becoming an architect. So these are the inborn cognitive aptitudes and proclivities that we have that you can get better at. But think about it this way. If I was to say to you or all of your listeners right now, take out a pen and write your name, just sign your name. And it feels great, it's easy. Then if I was to say, take the pen and put it in your non-dominant hand and sign your name, okay? And you'd be like, it's awkward, it's hard, I hate doing it. So aptitudes are the dominant hand of your brain. It's like, it's so much more natural. So you're so much better off building your life and your career where you already have the aptitudes. So there's a aptitude for brainstorming, like how you think about ideas. And some people, and this is not just how creative you are, it's how much ego control you have. So very big brainstormers not only are very creative and just spew ideas, they also say, I don't really care if somebody doesn't like my ideas. I'm going to put it out there because you got to have a lot of ideas. But other people have fewer ideas, or they have very strong ego editing, right? And they say, I'm not laying that idea until I know it's really good. So say you're a person who is in a job that really requires brainstorming, like you're a social media manager. You got to come up with 50 ideas a day, and you're not a natural brainstormer. Okay, I guess you could come up with some hacks. You could force yourself. It's going to be unnatural. Only a brainstormer by natural ability should be in that role. But there are jobs and roles for everybody with every aptitude, and just woe to the person who is in the wrong lane. If you're a brainstormer, go get a job that rewards brainstormers and get better at it. And if you're not, and you're a process supporter, meaning you just have one good idea a year and it's very perfect when it comes out, go into the line of work that rewards that. Because it's agony, to be in the, it's like another example of it is if you're a generalist is like the mayor of the town. They know a little bit about everything. They can just talk about any topic, and they're really good in some jobs, generalists. They're often good as managers. And then there's specialists. And this is the person you sit next to at a dinner party who wants to talk about like his research into like mushrooms, and they could talk to you for 3 hours and you're like, if you're a generalist, you're like, I can't take another minute of it. But if you're another specialist, you're like, tell me more. And if you have a specialist in a generalist's job, it's so unnatural. And this is an incredibly important thing I can't tell you how many times I've seen people have enormous eurekas, like run up to me and say, I finally understand why I can't get good at my job. You're fighting against yourself. You're writing with your non-dominant hand. So can you get better? Yeah, but these are not like skills where you're learning how to fix a sink, okay? Where if you just do it 3 times, you're going to get better and better at it. These are proclivities. These are innate wiring issues.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm definitely a specialist. So you're such a New Yorker. I love it. What do you make of like the notion then of manifestation, that you can ultimately do anything you want so long as you set your mind to it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've talked about this on my podcast and gotten a lot of love not about it. I understand that you want to put some thoughts out into the universe, and if you just sort of wish enough, I think manifestation and identifying what you really want is good. We almost never let ourselves do that. We edit ourselves too much. So I think that accessing part of manifestation is good, but putting it out into the universe, I don't know. Maybe you get very lucky. I think I think I may be just too scientific. I think you got to do the work. So I'm all about people wanting, because I do believe the great proverb that that hope deferred makes the heart sick, and a dream fulfilled is the tree of life. I do think that if we defer our hopes and our dreams for too long, it can actually make us physically sick, and that when you find the work that you were meant to do and you're doing it, it is life-giving. It's growth. It is the tree of life. So I do believe that, but I'm not sure that just accessing what you want and then just sort of letting go of it like a balloon in the air is going to get you there. And I think you can be really disappointed. I think the biggest danger of it actually falls on young women who are told to manifest finding a spouse, and then they feel very disappointed, and they're just hoping and dreaming, and it can be. I think it's quite. I've seen it really hurt a lot of young women.
Yeah, I've never heard that, but that.
And they're like, I've been manifesting my partner, and my partner's not coming. Am I not manifesting hard enough? And I think, It's not about that. Is that once you get out of college, the pool of available partners gets smaller and smaller, and this, just like everything else, it involves a kind of strategy, and manifesting is not a strategy.
Yeah, it rings of just being really woo-woo, but I think if you take a pragmatic approach to it and you set the conditions, you curate your environment so as to optimize for whatever it is that you're hoping to call in.
I mean, I think if you manifest and you really want, and you identify what you want, I guess I like the part where manifesting then meets reality, where you say, okay, do I have the aptitudes to do what I want to do?
That could be your follow-up book.
Okay.
Like how to use your principles and then on top of that apply the concept of manifestation. So the next step on the road to discovering your purpose, your area of transcendence, is economically viable interests. Talk to us about that.
Well, we touched on a little bit earlier when I said, people's apertures gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and part of the work of becoming you and the methodology is to say, have you thought about all these other industries and roles and megatrends? I'm like a fanatic about megatrends because there are big industries and big changes coming at us, and you can position yourself if they call you. Like I'm really into space mining. Space mining is going to be $1 trillion industry in the next 15 years. And the people who are getting in now are going to, but you have to be drawn to it. I'm drawn to it because imagine if we could extract all the minerals that we need on other planets where there's no animals and people. Wouldn't that be great? And it's going to be a gigantic industry. It's just starting right now. I'm very affected by an experience that happened to me in business school, which was when I was at HBS, when you graduated, they used to publish, believe this or not, that your rank, your GPA, the job you were going to go take, where you were going to work, and your starting salary. They used to publish that.
Wow.
I know. Imagine people's heads would explode today. And when that little booklet came out, I looked, and there were 7 guys who had no starting company. Everything else was there. No starting company and no starting salary. And I said to somebody else, where are they going? And these were like BMOCs. These were big men on campus. They were very popular. They were very smart. And they all had worked in finance beforehand. And I said, where are they going? And somebody said to me, again, in 1988, they're going to Silicon Valley. And I said, where's Silicon Valley? And, we were writing our essays in blue books in these days. And they said, it's near San Francisco. And I said, well, why are they going there? And the answer was, I think they like to golf. Okay, and they all became billionaires. I mean, they saw the mega trend of technology coming. They said, we're going there. And they all became incredibly entrepreneurs who became, and I think that it's very rare that we learn about the mega trends and we investigate them. And so I think the economically viable interest is to understand that there's more than you've been told that might be work for you. And there's a whole strategy for finding out about it. There's ways to learn about the types of work, the types of roles, the types of industries, and megatrends. And so that's the final bunch of data. Now, some people know exactly what they want to do. They're just drawn to nursing, okay? Or they really want to be in some way in communications. And for them, this part of the excavation is over very, very quickly because they say, you don't have to tell me, from when I was a little kid, I was going to be doing something with sports. It was going to be sports management. It's going to be something with working in an arena. And so not everybody needs to do this piece of the work. And then all the data goes into we used to do it by hand. We used to just actually have a workbook, and we'd go through all these questions, and then you would come up with what you should be doing with your life, what your purpose was. Now we have a tool. It's in beta. It's called Career Catalyst. You put in all the data, and literally you wait about 10 minutes, and you get a list of 5 jobs. And so it's exciting. It's not that tool's not ready yet, but it's going to be. And I still like to do the workbook part of it, where you look at it and you ask, okay, if these are my values, what kind of work should I be doing? And what kind of work shouldn't I be doing? You have to go there. Can't have magical thinking. Like if your number one value is family centrism, do you really want to go into investment banking? Okay. You got to ask that question. So we look at each one of the data sets and say, what work should I be doing and what shouldn't I be doing? And then usually 99% of the time, the work that's at the intersection of all of those data sets, it pops. I mean, it emerges because there's just not that much stuff at the center. You say, okay, this is clear. I really need to be a creative director. Too bad I'm a doctor right now, but no wonder I'm doing this methodology because I've been so unhappy. And I've seen this thousands of times. So pretty soon there'll be an actual tool that does it powered by AI. But right now, most people just go through the methodology and the answer is there for them.
So interesting. Is there a daily ritual or set of habits that might facilitate this process of discovering what your what some economically viable options might exist for you?
Yeah, well, I think that this is
Like reading trades or
exactly.
following
Yeah.
certain, channels on social media?
I like to say your currency is your currency. So meaning how current you are is your worth in a way. It's like you've got to stay ahead of what's going on. This is very hard because there's so much stuff out there. There's like, it's like 3 cannons pouring water onto you with information. And so I have a watch list of certain trades that I read and people that I read all the time, and I follow certain industries. I mean, it's a matter of just not throwing up your hands and saying there's too much, but curating for yourself people to follow, reading the Wall Street Journal. And I always say to my students, make sure that you're reading columnists that disagree with each other. You've got to break down the walls of only hearing from one kind of source and opening up your eyes. But for many people, just the revelation that they've closed their aperture is enough because they say, yes, that's me. I've done that. I've stopped thinking that there's anything outside of what I've been told there is. And so you do have to kind of forcibly do it. It's a discipline.
And saying yes to things, do you find that helps? That was something very early on for me that I found value in. It's like regularly getting out of my comfort zone, saying yes to things that I might otherwise, turn down, paying attention to what scares me, and oftentimes going in that direction anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's all very, very good. I taught my kids this line when if they bump into something that, or a person that they don't know more about, know enough about, saying, can you tell me more? People love to talk about themselves and their lines of work. And if you meet somebody, if you're at somebody's house, for instance, and their partner or their dad does something you've never heard about, like just the discipline of saying, tell me more about what you do. And it's just you can learn so much by asking the question. And people want to tell you. They want to tell you about their work. And you can learn so much just by being a little daily, that's it, like a daily thing is every single day, ask somebody, tell me more about your life. Tell me more about what you do. And you can be introduced to all sorts of kinds of work and possibilities and opportunities.
What is a lesson about meaning and money that you wish people learned earlier in life?
Well, it's really to boil down all behavioral economics into one statement. It's that we make a lot of decisions based on money, even when money doesn't matter to us. So we're kind of wired for it. Homo economicus, as they call the mindset that people have, is that we're making decisions often with very ambiguous and incomplete information. But sometimes the only information we have, when all other information is kind of miasmic, is a number. Like this house costs less, this job pays more, and a number is a hard piece of data, and our mind will glom on to the hard piece of data, and then we'll make a decision about a career or a marriage or a vacation or a promotion based on that one piece of data that's actually concrete, and we don't bring into account how much we actually care about money. And there's a great Talking Heads song from what is this beautiful house? What is this beautiful wife? My God, what have I done? I play that song for my students and they don't know what I'm talking about. They don't know who the Talking Heads are. It makes me feel old and sad because that's a brilliant song. But I would say that that's what happens when we make decisions based on just a number without understanding that affluence and our desire for it is actually a value. And only 37% of people have it in their top 5 values. But probably 98% act as if it's a number one value because our brains are wired that way. I mean, that is all. I'm offending every behavioral economic person who listens to your podcast to sum up your entire field of study. But that's the problem. And but imagine if you know what your values are and you say, you know what, affluence is actually number 7 for me. Why am I making the decision based on affluence when I should be making this based on my number 1 value, belonging, how much friends matter to me? And you need kind of rigor around it, not to make all your decisions based on money.
And do you find that money usually follows? Like, do you find that there's folly in chasing the money first, regardless?
Only if money is your number 1 value, and as I said, for 37% of people, it's in their top 5 values. And if money is your value and you chase it, it's folly if you don't have the aptitudes for it. I mean, because people go into investment banking, they think that's surefire money. They're going to be rich if they go into investment banking. And then they don't realize that investment banking is ruthless. If you're not good in it, within 3 years, you're out. And if you're sort of mediocre to 10 years, you're out and you don't have any skills that could be applied anywhere else. And so the money comes when you're in your area of transcendence. When you are, if it matters to you, if your area of transcendence is what your values are, what your aptitudes are, and what your economically viable interests are, it works itself out, because if affluence is number one, your number one value, then where are your very, very good aptitudes that you're going to make the most money using those? Yes, using those aptitudes. So there is kind of a calculus to it.
Yeah, I mean, using myself as an N of one anecdotal example,
Yeah.
I mean, I have never chased money. I think part of that has to do with the fact that I was raised comfortably, so I kind of got over that really quickly, and I wasn't driven by my parents to chase money. It was never, I would say it's probably far from my number one value. I mean, it's probably way down at the bottom of the list, but I went through years of not making any money, and it was only when I found my area of transcendence that I started making money.
That is exactly how it usually goes. That is exactly how it usually goes.
Yeah, it is amazing. You've said that you discovered your area of transcendence later in life.
Yeah, I did. I did probably at 60. So I can talk and write about this because I'm kind of guilty of every sin charged in this. So I had a lot of expectations around myself, but I had a lot of constraints. And I made a lot of decisions because I had 4 kids, and I had a husband who had a highly demanding job and career, and I had belovedness as a high value, so I put his career ahead of mine, and I felt oftentimes that my tree of life was not growing. But I reached a moment, and I was happy generally, but I oftentimes felt like I was not truly, I knew I was not living my purpose. I was abutting it. Okay, so I would be what you might call the thresholders. We call people who are close to their purpose but not in it. For many years, it was finally when I started writing about and teaching Becoming You that my values and aptitudes and interests were all completely aligned, and I thought, oh, this is good stuff. And so I'm really blessed that I found it at all, because people go through their whole lives and they don't. So yeah, I found it later. And it gives me a lot of hope when people say to me, is it too late for me? I'll say, how could it be? How could it be? You're still living.
Wow. When did you become a teacher?
5 years ago now.
And before that, you were in media.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then you had a stint in Miami, right?
I started in Miami. Right out of college, I became a reporter at the Miami Herald, 1981. And it was a fantastic experience. I learned so much about life and people. I always say, if you want a fast lesson in human nature, go be a crime reporter in Miami. And I learned so much. And I grew a lot while I was there. But I was not meant to be a reporter for a lot of different reasons around values. And when I finally was forced to become the business reporter, I moved up to Boston, went and worked at the Associated Press, and then I had to cover business. And I was like, I dig this so much. They're building things. And I'm from Portland, Oregon. I'm a sunny, sincere person. And I always sort of had an issue around sort of values that reporters have that they need to have. Like, they're challengers and they are cynical often, and they need to be that way to do their jobs properly. But I was always thinking everybody was, I wanted everybody to get along. And it was not a values fit, with no shade, because thank God the world has journalists. But when I discovered business, I was like, oh, okay, that is exactly where I belong. I want to build something. I want to be part of a team. I love that energy. And I said to my family, all artists, I think I want to go into business. And my mother and father were like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, to this day, they don't really understand, my interest in it. And it's fine. But I found my people when I found business.
Was it difficult for you to at that point whittle away other things that you had been passionate about? Because for me, I found that there was there were a few growing pains as I discovered, relatively early on, and I'm grateful that I did, that a person who chases 2 rabbits catches neither.
Yes. I really struggled with it. You kind of nailed it, because after I went to business school then to learn about business. And I got there, and of course, I got on the conveyor belt. I wanted to make money. I had paid for business school out of my pocket. I had done well in business school, so I got a lot of offers from consulting firms and investment banks, and I went off and I worked in consulting for 7 years. And I missed the creative aspects that had made me happy in journalism. I missed writing. And I finally was able to bring them together as a broadcast journalist, because I was still writing and I was producing. I loved the producing part of being on TV, and I was talking about business. So I was able to marry the two. And it was, and it worked well with having the kids, because I had a pretty flexible schedule, or I was able to have a more flexible schedule. And so I worked it out, but it wasn't, I have a super high value of radius, which is systemic change. And none of it was hitting that. And it was only when I started teaching Becoming You that everything lined up and all cylinders were firing. And I was like, oh my God, this was the missing piece.
Wow. I love that. Yeah. It's so cool. Such a cool story. I definitely relate. I mean, it took me, some time, some years of not making any money, some, as I mentioned, growing pains, some existential angst. But now that I feel like I've found that, I've ticked all of those boxes even before I had like the terminology to describe them.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're fully in your area of transcendence. It's a vibe, right? I can feel it off of it. Yeah. And I would say, I think that you shouldn't beat yourself up because you came to it much earlier than most people. You did. I mean, when I teach Becoming You in the Wild, I mean, there are people in their 50s and 60s, and they're like, please help me. I'm 58, I'm 62, I have lived for everybody but myself. And a lot of them come because they've heard me say it's better to be the author of your life than the editor, and they don't know what their life should be, but they know they're ready to be the author of it. And so I think you came to it pretty early, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, I feel super lucky. For people who are feeling stuck and burnt out, is there a first step that they should take today to begin realigning their lives?
I would say start with values. If you can, take the values bridge, find out what your values are and find out how much you're living them. You'll get a score on, you can go to valuesbridge.com to do that. And you'll get a score that tells you how close or far you are from living your values. Now that's only one piece of it. Then there's aptitudes. But like if you're fully living your values and you get a score back that you're in your area of transcendence, it will tell you that by just on your values, then you're good. But if you're looking at it, and many people have kind of like a moment of reckoning when they see it. I think that's the place to start. Figure out what your values are and begin to think about what your life might look like if you were living them more fully. That's a huge step. It's not a small step, but I'd say start there. Yeah.
Well, I love the tough love vibe that you offer. I mean, sometimes you don't, it's like you don't hear that enough. It's oftentimes you hear this, I think we live in an era of coddling.
Oh, yeah. My kids say the scariest word out of my mouth is when I say lovingly, because they know what's coming right after that is like radical candor. But I think that where does the coddling get us? Where does it get us? I think every single person would prefer the truth. And when you deliver it, they're like, okay, thanks. I thank you. I needed it. And so it is tough love. I mean, I definitely have been accused of that before. But I think I want tough love. I don't want to be coddled. I mean, look, there's times in your life where you do need to be coddled. There's times where you need psychological safety. I get it. I wanted no one giving me tough love after my husband died, for instance. I get that. But you've only got one, wild and precious life. And so why be coddled to the point where you don't discover it?
Yeah. And sometimes you look back and it's been years of coddling, if not decades of coddling, and you've been on a hamster wheel that entire time.
That's right. It's no good.
It's no good. Well, this was so fun. I've got one last question for you, but before we get to that, where can people pick up your book, which is out now?
Everywhere.
And where can they find you on social media?
Okay. You can find my book anywhere. Everywhere it's on. It's at Amazon. Any bookstore will have it, I hope. I'm at Suzy Welch on Instagram. That's my main platform. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter, which you can go to my website, SuzyWelch.com. It's free. Sign up for it. You'll find out all the stuff that's going on in Becoming Universe. And so those are all the different ways that you can kind of contact me.
Love it. You're a badass.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take it.
Yes. The last question that gets asked everybody on the show, what does living a genius life mean to you? Suzy Welch.
Yeah. There's a moment where you feel so exquisitely alive, where you're living your values and your aptitudes and whatever's calling you emotionally or intellectually. And I think that moment it comes together, why you have that Joan of Arc moment. Her sword said, I am not afraid. I was born to do this. And if you can get to a place where you could have that sword in your hand, I'm not afraid. I was born to do this. That's the genius life.
Amen. Love to hear it. Thanks again for coming out.
I love being here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. Share this episode with friends and loved ones that may benefit from it, and I will catch you on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.